Hollywood loves to talk about accountability. It loves to talk about standing up for women, protecting the vulnerable, and refusing to work with people accused of doing terrible things. But the closer you look at how that principle actually gets applied, the more it starts to look less like a moral stance and more like a business decision dressed up as one. And nowhere is that more obvious right now than in the gap between how Justin Baldoni was treated by his own agency and how Jared Leto is reportedly being treated by his. This isn't a small story confined to some obscure corner of the internet either. It's been spreading across Reddit threads, TikTok commentary videos, and Instagram slideshows for days, with people stitching together timelines, screenshotting old interviews, and asking the same basic question in 100 different ways. Why does one allegation move an entire agency to act within days, while another, involving far more accusers, apparently doesn't move anyone at all? That kind of organic, cross-platform attention usually means a story isn't going away quietly, and this one has all the markings of exactly that. So, here's the obvious question, the one that a lot of people online have started asking louder and louder: where is Ryan Reynolds on this one? Where is Blake Lively? These are two people who, by their own actions and their own public framing, position themselves as the ones standing up for women's safety in Hollywood. That was the entire justification given for going after Baldoni as hard as they did. So, if that principle is real and not just a tool that gets picked up or put down depending on who's inconvenient at the moment, shouldn't it apply here too? Shouldn't the same energy that got one actor dropped from an agency in days also be pointed at an agency that is, according to reports, refusing to even review misconduct allegations involving alleged minors? To be fair, and it's worth being fair here, nobody has confirmed that Reynolds or Lively have any obligation to comment on every allegation involving every actor at every agency in town. That's not how any of this technically works, but that's also kind of the point critics are making. If you're going to publicly frame yourself as someone who cares about accountability and safety, and if your camp is reportedly powerful enough to get someone removed from a major agency within days, then staying silent when a much larger set of allegations involving a much larger number of accusers surfaces against someone else at the same agency starts to look less like restraint and more like selective outrage.
Our agency, WME, they are standing by Jared Leto despite all the disturbing SA allegations. Now, you got to remember, they immediately dropped Justin when Ryan asked them to. So when Ryan Reynolds wants to get someone fired, yeah. I mean, it seems it seems more than alleged.
I feel like it's a fair conclusion to come to with the information that has been presented through a court of law.
Let's set the stage, because the timeline here matters a lot for understanding why people are so frustrated right now. When the legal dispute between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni became public, the fallout was immediate and severe. Reports at the time indicated that Ryan Reynolds personally pushed for Baldoni to be dropped by WME, and the agency reportedly complied without much hesitation. Ari Emanuel, WME's own co-CEO, allegedly said on a podcast that the agency does not work with people it considers creeps, framing the decision as a simple matter of values rather than a business calculation. Baldoni, whatever you believe about the underlying allegations against him, was gone from the agency almost as fast as the story broke, and the speed of that exit became a talking point of its own, held up by many as proof that the industry could actually move quickly when it wanted to. That fast turnaround shaped a lot of the public narrative going forward. It gave the impression that WME had a real, functioning process for cutting ties with clients accused of serious misconduct, and that the process could kick in almost overnight when the right people applied pressure. It also gave Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively a kind of moral high ground in the public conversation, since they were positioned, fairly or not, as the couple willing to hold someone accountable even at the cost of a messy, high-profile legal battle. That reputation is exactly why the current silence stands out so much to so many people watching this unfold. Now, compare that to what is reportedly happening with Jared Leto. According to a BBC investigation, 10 women have come forward alleging misconduct by Leto, with 4 of them claiming they were minors at the time of the alleged incidents. Leto has denied the allegations. But, according to reporting from Page 6, WME told the outlet directly that Leto remains a client, and that there are no plans to change that. When asked whether the agency's Client Advisory Committee, the same internal body that reportedly reviews serious misconduct allegations against clients, was even looking into what's being alleged in the documentary, the agency's spokesperson reportedly said no. Not, "We're reviewing it." Not, "We take this seriously." Just no. Sit with that for a second, because it matters. This is not a case where the agency says it evaluated the claims and decided to stand by its client anyway. That would at least be a position, right or wrong, something people could argue with directly. What's being reported instead is that the agency isn't even reviewing the claims at all. 10 accusers, some alleging misconduct involving minors, and reportedly, nobody at WME is putting that on the table for internal discussion. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni was dropped within what felt like days of Ryan Reynolds' camp making its feelings known. It's worth pausing on just how unusual that non-response actually is from a public relations standpoint. Facing allegations against high-profile clients almost always issue some kind of holding statement, even a vague one, along the lines of, "We are aware of the reports and are looking into the matter." That's standard crisis management, the kind of language that buys time without committing to anything. For WME to reportedly skip even that step and instead tell a major outlet that the Client Advisory Committee isn't reviewing anything suggests either total confidence that the allegations won't stick, or simply that the agency doesn't feel any real pressure to respond as though they might. Neither explanation is particularly reassuring, and both have fueled further speculation across social media about what exactly is driving that confidence. And this isn't a new pattern for WME specifically either. Following the Me Too movement in 2017, the agency reportedly built out a committee of around 20 staffers specifically to evaluate misconduct allegations against clients. And that committee reportedly recommended cutting ties with a number of high-profile names over the years that followed. So the infrastructure to actually review something like this is apparently already in place. It's not that WME lacks a process, it's that, according to what's being reported, the process allegedly isn't being applied evenly. That committee wasn't created quietly either. At the time it was announced, it was reportedly framed publicly as evidence that the agency had learned something from the Me Too reckoning, that it wanted to be seen as an industry leader on accountability rather than an institution that waited for scandals to force its hand. Years later, that same framing is exactly what makes the current situation look so contradictory. An agency doesn't build a 20-person internal review process, publicize it as a sign of a new era, and then quietly decline to even activate that process when 10 people come forward with allegations against one of its most prominent clients, without inviting exactly the kind of scrutiny it's now getting. It's also worth putting some numbers around the comparison, because several accusers can undersell how significant this actually is. 10 people alleging misconduct, spread across a documentary investigation from a major broadcaster, is not a fringe claim or a single disgruntled individual with an axe to grind. That's the kind of accuser count that, in past cases involving other public figures, has been treated as more than enough to trigger internal reviews, public statements, or at minimum, some acknowledgement that a claim is being taken seriously. The absence of that here is what keeps drawing comparisons back to Baldoni, where reportedly far less public pressure was needed to produce a much faster outcome.
It's clearly, if you're at WME, you have to be famous and bring in money. Otherwise, you're screwed. And I guess Jared's still probably bringing in money. That's the reality of how this allegation is going to face, because he's got his band, he's got tours, he's got other IP and stuff that he's been part of. He's still valuable to them.
Which raises the uncomfortable but pretty obvious theory floating around online. Maybe it comes down to money and leverage rather than principle. Leto isn't just an actor, he's got a band with an active touring schedule, additional intellectual property tied up in franchise work, and a fan base that by most accounts remains fiercely loyal even in the face of these allegations. Baldoni, by comparison, reportedly didn't carry the same kind of weight at the agency, and once a client with real industry power wanted him gone, there was apparently very little reason for WME to fight to keep him. If that theory holds any water, then what we're looking at isn't really a story about who is or isn't a creep. It's a story about who is profitable enough to be protected, regardless of what's alleged against them. This is the part of the story that keeps coming up in comment sections and reaction videos, because it lines up with a pattern a lot of people feel like they've seen before with other public figures across the industry, where allegations against someone with ongoing revenue streams tend to move much slower through the system than allegations against someone whose commercial value is easier to walk away from. It's not a new theory, and it's not unique to this case. But the side-by-side comparison between Baldoni and Leto has given it a particularly clean, easy-to-point-to example, which is likely a big part of why this story has traveled as far as it has online. People don't just want to talk about Leto specifically, they're using this as a stand-in for a much bigger conversation about how selectively accountability actually gets enforced once real money is on the table. None of this is to say Baldoni shouldn't have faced consequences or that any of these allegations should be treated as automatically true just because they've been made public. Allegations are allegations. Courts and investigations exist for a reason, and rushing to declare someone guilty based on headlines alone isn't fair to anyone involved, including accusers who deserve a real process rather than a social media trial. But that standard has to cut both ways. If the bar for removing someone from an agency is simply serious allegations have been made publicly, then that bar should apply to Leto too. And if the bar is actually higher than that, requiring some kind of formal review or legal outcome, then Baldoni arguably didn't meet that bar either when he was dropped. You can't have it both ways and call it a values-based decision. There's also the matter of Leto's broader public track record, separate from the BBC allegations, that's been resurfacing online as this story has spread. Multiple people who've worked with him, including well-known actors, have spoken in the past about unsettling behavior on set, often waved away at the time as he stays in character or dismissed as eccentric method acting. Comments and clips are being recirculated on social platforms right now, with people pointing out that these weren't exactly secret concerns before this documentary came out, and that some of it was treated as an open joke in entertainment coverage for years, rather than something anyone in the industry seemed inclined to act on. Whether or not any of that older behavior is legally relevant to the current allegations is a separate question, but it's part of why this story has resonated with people online as more than just a one-off headline. There's also been renewed attention online toward the community Leto has been associated with for years, with users on TikTok and Reddit circulating older photos and footage from retreats and gatherings tied to that group, describing the imagery as unsettling in hindsight. Some of this commentary edges into speculation that goes beyond anything that's been formally alleged or reported, and it's worth being careful about that distinction. Recirculated old footage and viral commentary are not the same thing as documented allegations, and treating them as equivalent isn't fair to anyone involved. Still, the fact that this older material is resurfacing at the same time as the BBC report has clearly amplified public scrutiny well beyond the 10 accusers named in that investigation, and it's part of why the story has stayed near the top of entertainment discourse rather than fading after a single news cycle. What people online seem to keep circling back to is the optics. Ryan Reynolds is widely understood within the industry to hold real influence that reportedly played a direct role in Baldoni's agency exit. If that influence is real, and there's little reason at this point to doubt that it is, then choosing when and where to apply it says something. using it to remove one person from an agency while staying quiet about an agency reportedly refusing to even review far more serious allegations against someone else, isn't a neutral choice. It's a choice, and it's one that a growing number of people online are openly criticizing as hypocritical, whether that criticism is entirely fair or not. There's an obvious counter-argument here too, and it deserves airtime rather than getting brushed aside. Reynolds and Lively are not WME. They don't run the agency, they don't sit on its client advisory committee, and there's no confirmed evidence that they have any formal say over who the agency represents. It's entirely possible they have no more power to force Leto out than any other client does, and that whatever influence they had in the Baldoni situation was specific to that case rather than some kind of standing authority over the agency's entire roster. If that's true, then the silence isn't necessarily hypocrisy, it's just the reality that one high-profile client asking an agency to drop someone doesn't automatically translate into that same client being able to dictate every personnel decision the agency makes. Still, the comparison keeps getting made online because the timelines line up so cleanly. One case moved fast, the other, according to reporting, isn't moving at all. And in the absence of any public statement from Reynolds or Lively addressing that gap, people are going to keep filling in the blanks with their own theories, fair or not. That's just how these stories work once they're out in public. Silence rarely reads as neutrality. It usually just gets interpreted as an answer of its own.
Demonstrably false. Where is it?
WME not making a move proves Kim. He doesn't have to do anything. They're basically saying, we're cool. It's okay, Jared. We got you. We got your back on this.
Disgusting. I want...
And look, if he's innocent, he should... Why isn't he coming out like Jay-Z did, right? With all the suing and doing all the stuff that innocent people would do, saying this is crazy. Any innocent person would be suing for defamation, would be throwing receipts down. You don't just ignore this and say it's all false. Sorry, never. And the agency's like, yep, we agree, it's false.
For now, there's no confirmed law enforcement investigation into the allegations against Leto in any jurisdiction, as far as public reporting shows, and there's been no formal charge filed against him. He denies the allegations, and he's entitled to that denial being taken seriously until something more concrete emerges one way or the other. But WME reportedly declining to even review the claims internally, especially after building out a formal process for exactly this kind of situation years ago, is going to keep fueling comparisons to how quickly Baldoni was cut loose. Whether that comparison is entirely fair or not, it's clearly not going away anytime soon. And it's worth watching whether Reynolds, Lively, or WME itself eventually says anything more on the record. It's also worth noting that this story isn't happening in a vacuum. It's landing at a moment when audiences online seem to be increasingly skeptical of celebrity statements in general, more willing to dig into agency records, old interviews, and legal filings themselves, rather than take a publicist's version of events at face value. That shift in how people consume entertainment news is a big part of why a story like this doesn't just fade after one news cycle anymore. People are actively comparing timelines, cross-referencing quotes, and holding public figures to their own previously stated standards, which is exactly the dynamic driving so much of the current conversation around Reynolds and Lively's silence. Whether that pressure eventually produces a public statement, a change at WME, or nothing at all remains to be seen, but the appetite for answers doesn't appear to be slowing down anytime soon. And there's a reasonable chance this becomes one of those stories that resurfaces every time a new detail leaks out rather than one that quietly disappears. This is exactly the kind of story that shows how selectively accountability gets applied in this industry once real money and leverage are involved, and it's worth keeping an eye on whether any of the parties involved actually address the double standard people keep pointing out. If you've followed the Baldoni and Lively situation closely, this one is worth watching just as much, if not more, given the number of accusers involved and how differently the two stories have been handled by the same agency. Drop your take in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of story where public pressure and ongoing coverage tend to make a real difference in whether an agency eventually responds. Thank you so much for watching. If this one kept you hooked, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Clout Fallout so you don't miss the next update on this story.